The live stream was going perfectly until everything went wrong. Aminat Bello, 24, Nigeria's biggest beauty influencer with 2.3 million followers, was broadcasting live from the rooftop of the Echo Atlantic Towers at golden hour, promoting a luxury skincare brand when the accident happened. Maybe it was the way Lagos traffic had backed up onto the bridge below, creating a perfect storm of frustration and reckless driving. Maybe it was the irony of her selling authentic beauty while wearing 3 layers of makeup and 5 different filters. Or maybe, just maybe, fate had decided that some meetings require a little chaos to cut through all the noise. Besties, this serum is literally life-changing, Aminat was saying to her phone camera, her voice bright and artificial. Use my code QUEEN20 for 20% off. The crash below was so loud it shook the building. Through her phone screen, she could see her comments exploding. OMG, what was that? Are you okay? Something happened behind you. Aminat spun around to see smoke rising from the street below, where a photography equipment truck had rear-ended a convoy of luxury cars. People were shouting, horns were blaring, and in the middle of it all, a tall, lean man was pulling expensive camera gear from his smoking truck, trying to save what he could. Guys, I think there's been an accident, she said to her live stream, instinctively moving toward the edge of the rooftop for a better view. Someone's hurt down there. But as she leaned over the railing, her phone, worth more than most people's monthly salary, slipped from her hands and plummeted 5 stories down, landing with a sickening crash right at the feet of the man rescuing his equipment. No, Aminat screamed, watching her entire digital life shatter on the asphalt below. The man looked up at the sound, squinting against the setting sun to see where the phone had come from. When his eyes met hers across the distance, something electric passed between them. Part recognition, part challenge, part something that made Aminat's carefully controlled heart skip a beat. Without thinking, she ran for the stairs. 5 flights down, she burst onto the street in her designer dress and stiletto heels, completely out of place in the chaos of the accident scene. The man was kneeling beside the remains of her phone, holding the pieces with the kind of careful reverence usually reserved for broken art. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, running toward him. "I was live streaming and reality interrupted the performance," he said, looking up at her with the most honest eyes she'd ever seen. "Happens to the best of us." Up close, he was devastating. Tall and lean, with photographer's hands and skin that glowed from actual sunlight instead of ring lights. His jeans were faded, his black t-shirt was now dust-covered from the accident, but there was something about his presence that made the chaos around them seem to quiet. "You're Aminat Bello," he said, not a question but an observation as he stood up, still holding her broken phone. "The beauty influencer. You say that like it's a disease. Depends on how you look at it." He handed her the phone fragments with a slight smile. "I'm Tunde Adebayo, and I was documenting real Lagos life when someone's Instagram life literally fell from the sky." "Real Lagos life?" She gestured to his damaged truck, the traffic jam, the chaos around them. "This is what you call real? More real than selling skincare to teenagers while wearing a filter that changes your entire face structure." The words should have offended her. Instead, they made her laugh. A real laugh, not her influencer giggle. "Are you always this brutally honest with strangers? Are you always this interesting when you're not performing for a camera?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the air like a knife. "Aminat, what the hell are you doing down here?" David Okonkwo, 32, CEO of TechRise Africa and worth approximately 500 million naira, emerged from one of the luxury cars in the convoy, the cars that Tunde's truck had hit. He was immaculate in his custom suit, untouched by the chaos around him, and absolutely furious. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you ended your live stream mid-sentence to come play in traffic? That my business meeting was interrupted because some reckless driver—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Tunde. You're the one who hit my convoy." "Actually, your driver cut me off," Tunde said calmly, not backing down despite David's obvious wealth and authority. "I was trying to avoid the accident when—" "I don't care what you were trying to do. Do you see that car?" He pointed to a slightly dented BMW. "That's 50 million naira of damage. What are you going to do about it?" Tunde looked at David, then at the minor dent, then at Aminat, who was watching the confrontation with growing fascination. "I'll pay for the damage," Tunde said simply. "It might take me a while, but I'll make it right." David laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "A while? Look at your truck. You probably don't make 50 million in 5 years. David, stop, Aminat said quietly. Stop what? This man just cost me money and time, and now you're… David stopped, really looking at Aminat for the first time. Why are you down here? And why do you look like you've been rolling around in the street? Aminat became aware of how she must look. Designer dress torn, makeup smudged, hair wild from running down 5 flights of stairs. She looked nothing like the polished influencer her 2.3 million followers expected. My phone fell, she said lamely. Your phone fell. David's voice was dangerously quiet. You ended a sponsored live stream that was worth 10 million naira to retrieve a phone. It was an accident. Everything is an accident with you lately. David pulled out his own phone. Kemi, cancel the rest of Aminat's evening. We need to discuss her focus and priorities. David, you can't just… Actually, I can. We're engaged, remember? Your brand affects my reputation, and your reputation affects my business. Engaged. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Tunde's expression shifted slightly, and Aminat saw something that looked like disappointment flicker across his face. Congratulations, Tunde said quietly, though he was looking at Aminat with those honest eyes that seemed to see right through her perfect facade. He's a lucky man. Yes, I am, David said, sliding his arm possessively around Aminat's waist. And now, if you'll excuse us, we have damage control to handle. You'll be hearing from my lawyers about the car. As David steered her toward his undamaged vehicle, Aminat found herself looking back at Tunde, who was already turning his attention back to his damaged truck and scattered equipment. Wait, she called out, surprising herself. Both men turned to look at her. Your camera equipment, she said to Tunde. Is it? Some of it's salvageable, he replied. The important stuff, the memory cards with today's work, survived. That's what matters. What kind of work? Tunde smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. The kind that shows what beauty actually looks like when it's not filtered, staged, or sold. Aminat, we're leaving, David said firmly. But as they drove away in David's climate-controlled luxury, Aminat found herself staring out the back window at Tunde, who was carefully gathering pieces of his equipment from the street. Something about his determination, his refusal to be intimidated by David's money, his casual dismissal of her fame. It all made her feel more awake than she had in months. You're not listening to me, David was saying. Sorry, what? I said, we need to announce our engagement officially. Tonight. The live stream disaster needs to be overshadowed by good news. Tonight. But I thought we were waiting. We can't wait anymore. Your behavior lately has been too erratic. An engagement announcement will stabilize your brand and lock in our partnership. Partnership, not love, not romance. Partnership. David, what if I'm not ready? Ready doesn't matter, darling. Success requires sacrifice and timing. And the timing is now. As they pulled up to the exclusive restaurant where David had planned their evening, Aminat's phone, David's backup phone, since hers was in pieces, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. For when you want to see what you look like when you're not performing. Attached was the photo he'd somehow managed to take during the chaos. Aminat mid-run, hair flying, dress torn, completely unposed and absolutely radiant with genuine emotion. She looked more beautiful in that moment of chaos than she had in any professional photo in her entire career. Who's texting you? David asked, already reaching for the phone. No one important, she said, quickly deleting the message before he could see it. But as they entered the restaurant where David would announce their engagement to his business associates and social media followers, Aminat couldn't stop thinking about the man who had shown her what she looked like when she was real. The restaurant was exactly what Aminat expected. Expensive, exclusive, and filled with Lagos's social media elite. David had clearly planned this moment down to the last detail. Photographers strategically positioned, influencers ready to share content, business partners waiting to witness the union of two powerful brands. Darling, you look perfect, David said as they were seated at the center table, though Aminat had spent the past 20 minutes in the bathroom trying to repair the damage from her street adventure. I don't feel perfect, she admitted. Feelings are temporary. Brand value is forever. David raised his champagne glass. Besides, you'll feel better once we make it official. Before Aminat could ask what he meant, David stood up and tapped his glass with a knife. The restaurant went quiet, phones appeared, and Aminat realized with growing horror what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, David's voice carried across the room with practiced authority. Thank you for joining us tonight. I have an announcement that will make this evening unforgettable. Before Aminat could ask what he meant, David stood up and tapped his glass with a knife. Not just any ring, a massive diamond that caught the restaurant lights and created its own small fireworks display. "Aminat Bello," David said, dropping to one knee as cameras flashed around them, "you are the most successful, most beautiful, most perfect woman in Nigeria. Will you marry me?" The restaurant erupted in applause. Phones were recording from every angle. Someone was already going live on Instagram. This was content gold, brand gold, social media gold. But all Aminat could think about was the way Tunde had looked at her in the street. Not as a brand or a prize or a perfect woman, but as a real person having a real moment. She began, her voice barely audible over the celebration that had already started around them. "She said yes," David announced, apparently not needing to hear her actual answer. "Nigeria's power couple is officially engaged." The ring slipped onto her finger, heavy, expensive, beautiful, and somehow feeling like handcuffs. As the crowd surged around them with congratulations and camera phones, Aminat felt like she was drowning in her own success. Her phone immediately started buzzing with notifications as the engagement photos went viral in real time. Aminat engaged was already trending. Comments were pouring in faster than she could read them. Goals, 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 perfect couple, living the dream, when's the wedding? But all she could think about was a broken phone on the street and a man who had called her performance what it was. Performance. "Smile, darling," David whispered in her ear as more cameras flashed. "This is the most important moment of your brand evolution." Brand evolution. Not life evolution, not love, brand evolution. As the evening progressed, Aminat played her part perfectly. She smiled, she posed, she answered questions about wedding plans and brand partnerships. She was everything a successful influencer should be in the moment of her engagement. But when she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror at the end of the night, all she saw was a stranger wearing an expensive costume, playing a role that felt increasingly foreign. Her phone showed the engagement announcement had gotten 3.2 million views across all platforms. Her follower count had jumped by 50,000 in one evening. Brand partnership offers were already flooding her DMs. It was the most successful night of her career. So why did she feel like she'd just sold her soul? Aminat woke up in her luxury Ikoyi apartment to find her engagement ring catching the morning light, throwing rainbow patterns across her white walls. Her phone showed 847 unread messages, 23 missed calls, and notification after notification of people sharing her engagement content. But all she could think about was a message that was no longer there. A photo of herself looking more real than any professional shot had ever captured. "Aminat, darling, we need to strategize." David's voice came from her kitchen, where he'd apparently let himself in and was making coffee with the efficiency of someone planning a corporate takeover. "Good morning to you too," she said, padding into the kitchen in her silk pajamas. "It's a great morning. The engagement announcement has generated more organic reach than any of your recent campaigns. We need to capitalize on this momentum." David was already dressed in another perfectly tailored suit. His hair immaculate, his energy focused and businesslike. He handed her a coffee in a mug that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. "I've scheduled interviews with 3 magazines, a podcast appearance, and a joint campaign meeting with 4 luxury brands who want to partner with us as a couple. David, can we just breathe for a moment? We got engaged last night." "Exactly, which means we have maybe a 48-hour window before the news cycle moves on. We need to maximize our visibility while we're trending." Aminat sat down at her marble kitchen island, staring at the ring that felt heavier every time she looked at it. "What if I don't want to be trending?" David looked at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I want our engagement to be about us, not about brand partnerships and media opportunities?" "Aminat, there is no us separate from our brands. You are a brand, I am a brand. Together, we're a super brand. That's the point." "Is it? What about love? What about getting to know each other better? What about—" "Love is a luxury for people who don't have empires to build," David interrupted. "We have compatibility, mutual benefit, and shared goals. That's more than most marriages can claim." Aminat's phone buzzed with yet another notification. Without thinking, she opened Instagram and scrolled through the thousands of comments on their engagement photos. Most were congratulatory, but a few stood out. Something feels fake about this. She doesn't look happy. Arranged for business much. Remember when influencers used to be real people? You're reading the comments, David observed. Rule number 1, never read the comments. Rule number 2, definitely never let them affect your mood. What if they're right? Right about what? What if this is all fake? What if I've built my entire life on something that isn't real? David set down his coffee and looked at her with the kind of patient expression usually reserved for difficult clients. Aminat, you're having pre-engagement anxiety. It's normal. But you need to remember what's at stake here. Your career, your family's security, your future, everything depends on maintaining your position in the market. Market. He was talking about her life like she was a stock option. I'm going out, she said suddenly. Out where? We have the magazine interview at 11. I need air. I need to think. I need to remember who I am when I'm not being photographed. Aminat, you can't just disappear. We have commitments. The commitments can wait. She stood up, grabbed her keys, and headed for the door. Where are you going? David called after her. To find something real. Aminat found herself driving through Lagos with no destination in mind, just the need to be anywhere that didn't feel like a stage set. Without really planning it, she ended up in the same area where yesterday's accident had happened, drawn by some impulse she couldn't name. The street looked different in daylight, less dramatic, more ordinary. The luxury cars were gone, traffic was flowing normally, and there was no sign of the chaos that had brought her and Tunde together. But there, parked at a small cafe she hadn't noticed yesterday, was a familiar beat-up truck. Her heart rate spiked as she recognized it, dented from the accident, but apparently still functional. Before she could second-guess herself, she parked and walked into the cafe. It was the kind of place she never went to, local, unpretentious, filled with the smell of real food and real conversation. And there, in a corner booth with his laptop and camera equipment spread across the table, was Tunde. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then his face broke into that transformative smile that made her forget about her 2.3 million followers, her brand partnerships, and her ring that felt like a weight on her finger. The famous beauty influencer, he said, standing up as she approached. Come to document the authentic cafe experience for your followers. I came to see what it feels like to be somewhere real, she said honestly. And how does it feel? Aminat looked around the cafe, at people having actual conversations instead of performing for cameras, at the mismatched furniture and handwritten menu, at the complete absence of ring lights or perfect angles. Terrifying, she admitted, and wonderful. Tunde gestured to the seat across from him. Want to be terrified and wonderful for a few more minutes. As she sat down, Aminat noticed what was on his laptop screen. Photos from yesterday's accident. But not the chaos, not the damage, not the obvious drama. Instead, he had captured moments of human connection. Strangers helping each other, people sharing umbrellas, small acts of kindness in the middle of disruption. These are beautiful, she said, genuinely moved. These are real, he replied. This is what I was trying to document when your phone fell from the sky and changed my day. Changed it how? Tunde studied her face. Made me wonder what would happen if someone like you, someone with a platform, with influence, with the ability to reach millions of people, decided to show them something real instead of something perfect. People don't want real. They want fantasy. They want to believe that if they buy the right products and follow the right steps, they can have the perfect life I pretend to have. Do you really believe that? Aminat thought about it honestly. I used to. Now I don't know what I believe. Can I show you something? Tunde turned his laptop toward her and opened a different folder of photos. Images of Lagos that she'd never seen, despite living here her entire life. Street vendors with dignity, children playing with pure joy, elderly people whose faces told stories of resilience and wisdom, young people creating art from nothing but passion and determination. This is the Lagos I document, he said. The Lagos that exists when no one's performing for cameras, when no one's trying to sell anything, when people are just living. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's honest, and honestly beautiful. Their conversation was interrupted by her phone buzzing insistently. David's name flashed on the screen, along with increasingly urgent text messages. Your fiancé? Tunde asked, not missing the way her expression changed. My business partner, she said without thinking, then caught herself. I mean, yes. David. There's a difference? The question hung in the air between them. Aminat realized she couldn't answer it honestly without admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. I should go, she said, standing up reluctantly. Should you? Or do you feel like you should? Is there a difference? That's what you need to figure out. As she turned to leave, Tunde called her name softly. Aminat? Yes? If you ever want to see what authenticity looks like, I'll be documenting real life at the Balogun market tomorrow morning. Dawn to noon. No cameras for social media, no performance, no agenda except truth. Why would you want me there? Because I think underneath all the filters and brands and performance, there's someone interesting, someone real, someone who might have something genuine to say to those 2.3 million people who follow her. As Aminat walked back to her car, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Curiosity about herself. Not about her brand, not about her image, but about who she actually was when no one was watching. Her phone was exploding with missed calls and messages from David, from her management team, from brand partners wanting to capitalize on her engagement momentum. But all she could think about was tomorrow morning at dawn. The rest of Aminat's day passed in a blur of interviews, photo shoots, and brand meetings, all focused on capitalizing on her engagement announcement. By evening, she was exhausted from performing happiness she didn't feel about a future she wasn't sure she wanted. The numbers are incredible, Kemi, her manager was saying as they reviewed the day's analytics in Aminat's apartment. Engagement up 340%, follower growth rate tripled, and we have six-figure brand partnership offers coming in hourly. That's great, Aminat said automatically, though she felt strangely disconnected from her own success. Great, it's phenomenal. David was right. The engagement was exactly the catalyst your brand needed. Kemi, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I'm happy? Kemi looked up from her tablet, surprised. What kind of question is that? You're one of the most successful influencers in Africa. You're engaged to a tech billionaire. Your brand value has never been higher. Of course you're happy. But do I look happy to you? Actually happy, not camera happy. Kemi studied her face with the kind of analytical attention usually reserved for content performance metrics. You look successful. That's not what I asked. Aminat, happiness is subjective. Success is measurable. Focus on what you can control. After Kemi left, Aminat sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the hundreds of photos from their engagement announcement. In every single image, she looked perfect. Radiant skin, flawless makeup, designer dress, million-dollar smile. But when she looked at her eyes in the photos, she saw something that made her stomach clench. Emptiness. She opened her laptop and searched for Tunde's photography work online. His Instagram had only 8,000 followers compared to her 2.3 million, but every image told a story that felt more real than anything she'd ever posted. His captions were thoughtful, his subjects were authentic, his vision was clear and uncompromising. In one photo of an elderly woman selling fruits at a market, the caption read, "Beauty isn't about perfection, it's about presence, about being fully alive in your own life instead of performing someone else's version of living." The words hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time she had been fully alive in her own life? Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dinner tomorrow at 8. We need to discuss wedding timeline and joint branding opportunities. Wear the blue dress. It photographs well." Wear the blue dress because it photographs well. Not because she liked it, not because it made her feel beautiful, but because it would create good content. She looked at the massive engagement ring on her finger. Beautiful, expensive, and somehow feeling more like a prop than a symbol of love. Before she could second-guess herself, she typed a response. "Can't do dinner tomorrow. Prior commitment." David's reply came immediately. "What commitment? We discussed your schedule this morning. Personal matter, we'll reschedule." Aminat, we can't reschedule brand partnerships around personal matters. This is business. This is business. Their engagement, their relationship, their entire life together. All business. She turned off her phone and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she lay awake thinking about tomorrow morning at the Balogun market, wondering what it would feel like to spend time in a place where no one cared about her follower count or her brand partnerships, wondering what it would feel like to be real. Dawn in Lagos was something Aminat had never experienced. As someone whose work typically began around noon and ended well after midnight, she had forgotten that the city had this quiet, golden hour when real life happened before the performance of daily life began. The Balogun market at 6 a.m. was a revelation. Vendors setting up their stalls, children helping their parents before school, the air filled with the sounds of real commerce and community. No ring lights, no cameras crews, no staged moments, just life happening authentically. She found Tunde exactly where she expected, moving through the market with his camera, documenting moments that most people would consider too ordinary to notice. But through his lens, the ordinary became extraordinary. A mother braiding her daughter's hair while balancing a baby on her hip. An elderly man teaching a young boy how to arrange vegetables for maximum visual appeal. Women laughing together while sorting tomatoes. "You came," he said when he noticed her approaching, and something in his voice suggested he hadn't been entirely sure she would. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "What changed your mind?" "I wanted to see what it felt like to do something because I wanted to, not because it was good for my brand." "And how does it feel?" "Scary, but also free." Tunde smiled and handed her a simple point-and-shoot camera. "Want to try documenting something real?" "I don't know how to take real photos. I only know how to take photos that get likes." Same equipment, different intention. Instead of asking, "Will this get engagement?" ask, "Does this matter to me?" For the next 3 hours, Aminat moved through the market with a perspective she'd never experienced. Without the pressure of creating content for millions of followers, she found herself noticing details she would normally miss. The weathered hands of a seamstress creating beauty from scraps of fabric. The pride in a young entrepreneur's eyes as he described his small business. The way light fell across bundles of fresh herbs. "You're a natural," Tunde observed, looking at some of the photos she'd taken. "These aren't good enough for social media," she protested. "They're too good for social media. Look at this one." He showed her a photo she'd taken of an elderly woman counting money. Her expression focused, dignified, completely unaware of being photographed. There's no filter, no staging, no performance. But she's beautiful because she's real. She's present in her own life. "When was the last time I was present in my own life? When was the last time you tried to be?" The question haunted her as they sat in a small local restaurant, eating breakfast that tasted like food instead of content. Around them, people were having conversations, laughing, arguing, living, all without documenting it for social media. "Can I ask you something?" Aminat said. "Anything. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me." Tunde set down his coffee and looked at her seriously. "Because I've watched social media turn talented, interesting people into brands. And brands aren't people, they're products. I think you might still be a person underneath all the performance. What if I'm not? What if the performance is all there is? Then you'll spend the rest of your life being very successful and very empty. Is that what you want?" Before she could answer, her phone, which she'd kept on silent, lit up with dozens of missed calls and increasingly frantic messages. David, Kemi, her mother, brand partners, her assistant. Everyone in her professional life was having a collective panic attack because she'd been unreachable for 4 hours. "The real world is calling," Tunde observed. "That's not the real world. That's the performed world. But it's the world you have to live in. What if I don't want to live in it anymore? What if you figured out how to live authentically within it? Is that possible? That's what you need to decide." As she prepared to leave, returning to the climate-controlled luxury of her regular life, Tunde handed her a memory card. "What's this?" "The photos you took today. Don't post them, don't share them, don't turn them into content. Just look at them when you need to remember what it felt like to be present in your own life." Driving back to her apartment, Aminat felt like she was traveling between 2 different worlds. The real one she'd just experienced and the performed one she was returning to. The question was, which one was actually hers? Aminat's apartment was in chaos when she returned. David was pacing in her living room while Kemi frantically worked her phone and her mother sat on the white leather sofa looking like the world was ending. "There she is," David said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The missing influencer." "I wasn't missing. I was busy." "Too busy to answer your phone? Too busy to attend the brand meeting I specifically scheduled? Too busy to remember that your personal choices affect other people's livelihoods?" Aminat looked around the room at the faces of people who claimed to care about her. All of them angry, not because she might have been hurt or in trouble, but because she had missed business opportunities. "What brand meeting?" "Louis Vuitton," Kemi said, looking up from her phone with exhaustion. "They wanted to discuss a 7-figure partnership contingent on your engagement announcement momentum. When you didn't show, they assumed you weren't serious about the collaboration." "Maybe I'm not." The room went silent. "What do you mean?" David's voice was dangerously quiet. "I mean, maybe I don't want to sell luxury bags to teenagers who can't afford them while pretending it's about empowerment." "Since when do you have moral objections to luxury partnerships?" her mother asked sharply. Those partnerships pay for this apartment, your car, your lifestyle. They pay for my performance. But what if I don't want to perform anymore? Maybe I should have questioned it sooner. Questioned what exactly? Aminat looked around the room, at the ring lights permanently set up in 3 corners, at the wardrobe full of clothes chosen for their photogenic qualities rather than her personal taste, at the white walls perfect for Instagram backgrounds. All of it. The performance, the partnerships, the pretending that selling products to people who worship my fake life is somehow meaningful work. It is meaningful, Kemi protested. You have influence. You inspire people. I manipulate people. There's a difference. Her mother stood up, her voice sharp with years of financial anxiety. Aminat, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this nonsense stops now. You have responsibilities. You have people depending on you. What about what I depend on? What about my happiness? What about my soul? Soul doesn't pay bills, her mother said flatly, echoing what she'd said before. And bills don't make life worth living. David crossed his arms, his business instincts kicking in. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Louis Vuitton. We're going to reschedule the meeting. You're going to post an explanation about taking a mental health morning, which will actually be great content about self-care. And we're going to get back on track. And if I don't want to get back on track, then you'll lose everything. Your contracts, your partnerships, your income, your platform. Everything you've built will disappear. Everything I've built is already gone, Aminat said quietly. I just haven't admitted it yet. She walked to her bedroom and closed the door, leaving behind a room full of people whose livelihoods depended on her willingness to keep performing a life she no longer wanted to live. Alone in her room, she inserted Tunde's memory card into her laptop and looked at the photos she'd taken that morning. In every image, she saw something she hadn't seen in her content for years. Authenticity. The woman behind the camera in these photos wasn't performing or selling or pretending. She was just present. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. We need to fix this. Whatever's going on with you, we'll handle it together. But you can't destroy everything we've built over some existential crisis. Everything we've built. But what had they built, really? A brand partnership, a mutually beneficial arrangement, a performance of love without any actual love. She looked at her engagement ring. Beautiful, expensive, and somehow feeling like the physical representation of everything that was wrong with her life. Without allowing herself to think about it, she slipped the ring off her finger. The next morning, Aminat did something she had never done in her 4-year influencer career. She went live on Instagram without a script, without perfect lighting, without makeup, and without any idea what she was going to say. Hi everyone, she began, her voice shaky but determined. I need to tell you something, and I need to be completely honest. The viewer count climbed rapidly, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people tuning in to see their favorite influencer's morning routine. But this wasn't going to be a morning routine. For the past 4 years, I've been selling you a life that doesn't exist. I've been promoting products I don't use, relationships I don't feel, and happiness I don't have. The comments section began to explode, confusion, support, criticism, shock all flowing by faster than she could read. 3 days ago, I got engaged to a man I don't love because it was good for business. I've been living in a beautiful apartment that feels like a prison, wearing clothes chosen for their photogenic qualities and pretending that selling you fantasies is the same as inspiring you. She held up her left hand, showing her bare ring finger. I took off my engagement ring last night because I realized that I was about to marry someone who sees me as a brand asset rather than a human being. And I was okay with that because I had forgotten that I was supposed to be a human being. I'm taking a break. I don't know for how long. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for you. I need to remember what it feels like to live my life instead of documenting it for your entertainment. She paused, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this and you're also performing a life you don't actually want, stop. If you're buying things to look like me, stop, because I don't even look like me. If you're following my life because you think it's perfect, stop, because perfection is just another word for fake. Her phone was buzzing with incoming calls, but she ignored them. I'm going to end this live stream now, and I'm going to go live a real day in a real life. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know it doesn't involve ring lights or brand partnerships or pretending that sponsored content is the same as authentic connection. She looked at the camera one more time. If you want to follow someone's real life instead of their performed life, go outside, talk to real people. Create something that matters to you, not something that gets likes. And remember that you are more interesting than your Instagram feed. She ended the live stream and immediately turned off her phone. Within an hour, AminatTruth was trending worldwide. News outlets were calling it everything from a mental breakdown to a revolutionary moment in influencer culture. Her mentions were exploding, brand partners were panicking, her management team was in crisis mode. But Aminat was at Tunde's apartment in Surulere, helping him develop photos in his makeshift darkroom and learning what it felt like to create something beautiful without documenting it for social media. "No regrets?" he asked, watching her carefully adjust the exposure on a print. "A million regrets," she said honestly, but none about telling the truth. "What now? Now I figure out who Aminat is when she's not trying to be perfect for millions of strangers. And us, what are we?" Aminat looked at him, really looked at him. He was watching her with those honest eyes that had first made her question everything about her life. "We're whatever we choose to be. No cameras, no performance, no audience except ourselves." "I can work with that," he said, and kissed her in the red light of the darkroom, where nothing was filtered and everything was real. 6 months later, Aminat stood in front of a classroom of 30 students at a public school in Mushin, Lagos. She was teaching basic media literacy, helping young people understand the difference between authentic content and advertising, between real life and performed life. "Miss Aminat," one of her students asked, "is it true you used to be famous on the internet?" "I used to be famous for pretending to be perfect on the internet," she corrected gently. "There's a difference. Do you miss it?" Aminat thought about the question seriously. She missed the financial security, certainly. She missed not worrying about paying bills. She missed the validation that came with millions of followers. But she didn't miss the performance. She didn't miss the anxiety of maintaining a perfect image. She didn't miss selling her soul for sponsored content. "I miss parts of it," she said honestly, "but I don't miss feeling like a stranger in my own life." After school, she met Tunde at the small cafe, where they'd first had a real conversation. He was editing photos from a documentary they were creating together about young people choosing authenticity over social media fame, a project that had grown from their shared belief that real stories mattered more than viral content. "How was teaching?" he asked, looking up from his laptop. "Wonderful, exhausting, real. The best kind of real." Her phone buzzed with a notification. Her Instagram account, which she had reactivated after 3 months of silence, now had 400,000 followers. People who were interested in her honest content about education, authenticity, and building a life that mattered rather than a life that looked good online. The brand deals weren't as lucrative, but they were with companies she actually believed in. The engagement wasn't as high, but it was genuine. The influence was smaller, but it was real. "Any regrets?" Tunde asked, the same question he'd asked 6 months ago. "About leaving the performance? Never. About how it affected my family? Every day." Her relationship with her mother was still strained. The financial adjustment had been difficult. David had made good on his threats. She'd lost most of her high-paying partnerships and had to move to a smaller apartment. "But," she continued, "they're learning something too. They're learning that there are different ways to measure success. They're learning that their daughter chose authenticity over money, and that maybe that's worth something." "And David?" "David is engaged to another influencer now, someone who's better at the performance than I ever was." She smiled without bitterness. "I hope they're happy. I really do." "Are you happy?" Aminat looked around the cafe, at real people living real lives, at Tunde with his honest eyes and his commitment to truth, at her own reflection in the window, showing a woman who looked present in her own life. "I'm learning how to be happy. Not for the camera, not for the audience, just for me. And it's harder than performing happiness, but it's also infinitely more worth it." As they walked home through the busy streets of Lagos, Tunde occasionally stopped to photograph moments that caught his eye. A woman braiding her daughter's hair, teenagers sharing a joke, an elderly couple walking hand in hand. "Can I take your picture?" he asked Aminat as they paused at a street corner. "Here, like this?" She gestured to her simple teacher's clothes, her minimal makeup, her tired but content expression. "Especially like this." She didn't pose, she didn't perform, she just existed in the moment, watching the city she loved come alive around her. That's when he took the photo. Later, looking at the image on his camera, Tunde showed her a woman who looked genuinely, authentically, radiantly happy. Not the performed happiness of her influencer days, but the quiet satisfaction of a person living in alignment with her values. "That's who you really are," he said softly. "That's who I'm becoming," she corrected. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Dear viewers, in a world where everything is content and everyone is performing, sometimes the most radical act is simply being real. Aminat's journey reminds us that followers, likes, and engagement are poor substitutes for genuine connection, authentic work, and honest love. In an age where social media promises us everything, it often delivers nothing but anxiety, comparison, and the exhausting pressure to perform perfection. But there's another way. The way of authenticity, presence, and choosing real relationships over virtual validation. If this story inspired you to question your own relationship with social media, to value your real life over your online life, to choose substance over followers, then give us a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to remember that they are more than their personal brand. Subscribe for more stories about choosing truth over trends and hit that notification bell. But then maybe put your phone down and go live some real life. Stay authentic, stay present, and remember, your real life is always more interesting than your highlight reel.